Look at the time right now. Whatever your screen says, the hour, the minute, the date, that number is, in a strange way, a message about the future of our entire species. Not a metaphor, not a poem, a piece of evidence. Here's what I mean. Of all the people who could ever possibly have been born, everyone in the deep past, everyone alive now, and everyone who might ever come after, you were born here, early in the 21st century, into a world of 8 billion. You opened your eyes at this exact coordinate in the whole sweep of human history. And in 1983, a Cambridge physicist named Brandon Carter pointed out something about that ordinary little fact that has quietly disturbed serious people ever since. He argued that your own birth, the least remarkable thing about you, the one thing you didn't choose and didn't earn, can be read as a probabilistic warning. That you are, statistically, evidence that humanity does not have a long road left ahead of it. I'm going to walk you all the way out to the edge of that argument, and then one step past it. And I'll tell you now, up front, so you can decide whether you want to come. It does not end where you think it does. It doesn't end with comfort, and it doesn't end with the apocalypse you're bracing for either. It ends somewhere stranger than both. This isn't cheap intrigue. It's a disclaimer. If you're the kind of person who lies awake after a thought gets its hooks into you, maybe watch this one in the morning. Still here? Good. Let's start with a jar of balls. Imagine I put two jars in front of you. They look identical from the outside. One of them contains 10 balls, numbered 1 through 10. The other contains 1,000 balls, numbered 1 through 1,000. I shuffle them, I hide them. You can't tell which is which. You reach into one of the jars, you don't know which, and you pull out a single ball. You look at it. It says 6. Now, which jar do you think you're holding? The one with 10 balls, or the one with 1,000? Take a second with it. The intuitive answer, the gut answer, is the small one, the jar of 10. And your gut is right, and there's real math underneath the gut. If you're holding the small jar, drawing a low number like 6 is completely unremarkable. Every ball in there is a low number. But if you're holding the giant jar, the one with 1,000 balls, then drawing a 6 is a little miracle. You'd have had to reach past 994 higher numbers to find it. It's possible. It's just wildly unlikely. So when you see that 6, the smart bet, not a certainty, but the smart bet, is that you're holding the small jar, the one that runs out soon. Hold on to that feeling. The feeling of a low number meaning a short total. We're going to need it. Because here's the move Carter made, and after him, a philosopher named John Leslie, who wrote an entire book about this that I'll come back to. The move is this. Imagine that every human being who will ever live gets a number. Not a name, a birth order. The first anatomically modern humans, deep in the African past, their numbers 1, 2, 3. And the numbering just runs forward through all of history, through every person who ever drew breath, all the way up to the very last human who will ever live, whoever that turns out to be, whenever that turns out to be. You have a number in that sequence, so do I. And the demographers have actually tried to work it out. Add up everyone, all the hunter-gatherers, all the farmers, all the empires, all the plagues, all the way to today. And the best estimates land somewhere north of 100 billion people. Recent figures put it around 117 billion human beings who have ever lived. Which means your number, give or take, is about 100 billion. You are, roughly, the 100-billionth human. And now Carter just asks the jar question again, except the jar is the whole human race. You've drawn a ball. It says 100 billion. So which jar are you holding? Are you holding the small one? A species that totals, say, a couple hundred billion and then ends fairly soon, cosmically speaking? Or are you holding the enormous jar, the one where humanity spreads across the galaxy and persists for millions of years and produces not 100 billion people, but 100 trillion? A number so vast that being born this early would be a 1 in a billion fluke. The same logic that told you to bet on the small jar tells you to bet on the small future. Your own existence, your unremarkable little birth certificate, is quietly whispering that the total isn't going to be that big. That we are not, in fact, at the dewy beginning of an endless human story. That we might be somewhere closer to the middle, or past it. Now, I can feel you wanting to argue. Good, you should. The first time I encountered this, I was maximally annoyed by it. It feels like a card trick. It feels like the kind of thing that sounds airtight at 2 in the morning and falls apart in daylight. And we are going to put it under daylight, I promise. There's a hole in it, an enormous and beautiful hole. And finding that hole is the whole point of this video. But we can't find the hole until we've felt the full weight of the thing. So bear with me. Let it sit there, uncomfortably, like a stone in your shoe. Because here's the second thing, and this one isn't philosophy. This one's just arithmetic, and it's worse. For almost the entire run of the human story, there were barely any of us. Spread out across the whole of prehistory, humanity numbered in the few millions at most. Tiny bands, flickers of firelight in an enormous dark. If you'd taken a census of Earth at almost any random moment in the last 200,000 years, you'd have found a small, fragile, scattered population. And then, in a geological eye blink, the last couple of centuries, the curve goes vertical. 1 billion, 2, 4, 8. So here's the part that genuinely unsettles me. The 8 billion people alive on Earth right now are not some small slice of all the humans who ever lived. They are a startling fraction of the total. Out of that 117 billion-ish grand total of everyone ever, around 7% of them are alive at this exact moment, breathing simultaneously, right now. You could, in principle, be in a group chat with 7% of all the humans who have ever existed. Sit with the strangeness of that. For 200,000 years, humanity was a whisper, and you happen to have been born during the 3 or 4 seconds when it became a scream. And if the total really does end up somewhere in the low hundreds of billions, which is exactly what the jar argument is hinting at, then you are not near the beginning of the human story. You're near the middle of it. Maybe past the middle. Wait. No, let me say that more carefully, because it matters. It's not that the math proves we're doomed. Probability never proves anything. It nudges. It tilts the odds. What it's doing is taking the single most boring fact about you, that you exist now, and turning it into a thumb on the scale. A thumb pressing gently down on the side that says, not much longer. And here's where it gets strange. because you'd expect this kind of argument to live only in the heads of stoned philosophy undergrads and lonely internet forums. You would not expect to find it taken dead seriously by one of the most respected, least excitable scientists alive. Which brings me to the book at the center of all this. The book is called Our Final Hour. In Britain, it came out under the title Our Final Century, which is a little less tabloid, and honestly, the British title is the more accurate one. It was published in 2003, and the man who wrote it is named Martin Rees. Now, I want to be careful here, because the whole force of this book comes from who is saying it. Martin Rees is not a doom influencer. He is not selling you a bunker or a supplement. He is a cosmologist at Cambridge. He held the title of Astronomer Royal, which is about as establishment, as buttoned up as you can get in British science. He's been president of the Royal Society, a lord even. He sits in the House of Lords. This is a man whose entire professional temperament is built around being calm, conservative, and unflappable about enormous timescales. He thinks about the lifetimes of stars for a living. The death of the sun, to him, is a Tuesday. And this is the man who looked at the 21st century and put a number on our survival.
I'll get to the number in a moment, and I'll be honest with you about my relationship to this book because it's complicated. Rees is a brilliant thinker, and I'll say it gently, not always a thrilling writer. There are passages where you can feel the scientist in him fighting the storyteller and the scientist winning. But that's almost the point. This isn't a book trying to scare you. It's a book by a man who scared himself, doing the math, and felt obligated to show his work. And he's standing on the shoulders of others. There's the philosopher I mentioned, John Leslie, who in 1996 wrote a book literally called The End of the World, which is the most rigorous, careful, maddening treatment of that jar argument you will ever read. The philosophical spine of this whole thing, and a book Rees's own work mostly gestures at rather than fully wrestles with. And then, a few years later, a young Oxford philosopher named Nick Bostrom would build the whole machinery out properly in a book called Anthropic Bias, working out exactly what it means to treat yourself as a random sample of all observers. We'll need Bostrom later. He's the one who eventually shows us the hole in the floor. But Rees is our anchor, so let's get his number. In Our Final Hour, Martin Rees, Astronomer Royal, the calmest man in the room, states his considered estimate that humanity has no better than a 50-50 chance of surviving the 21st century without a catastrophic setback. A coin flip. He literally bet on it. There was a public wager about whether a single event would kill 1 million people by the year 2020. A coin flip. On us. On all of it. From a man constitutionally incapable of exaggeration. And when I first read that, my reaction was, okay, but that's just vibes. That's a smart man being gloomy. 50% of what, exactly? You can't multiply a feeling. So I went looking for the actual mechanism. What is it, specifically, that a sober cosmologist thinks could close out the human story inside 100 years? What pulls the trigger? And this is where the abstract becomes very, very physical. It starts with the most famous equation in the world, and almost nobody really feels what it says. E equals mc squared. We've all seen it on a t-shirt. Here's the part the t-shirt leaves out. That little c, the speed of light, is an enormous number, and the equation squares it. So the exchange rate between matter and energy is not 1-to-1.
It is one too unthinkable. A tiny, tiny amount of matter, if you can fully unlock it, contains a city's worth of energy. How tiny? Let me make it physical, because numbers on their own are just noise. The bomb that destroyed Hiroshima in 1945, the fireball, the shockwave, the heat that printed shadows of vaporized people onto stone. Almost all of that energy came from matter that simply vanished, converted by Einstein's exchange rate directly into energy. And the amount of matter that vanished was less than a single gram, less than the weight of a paperclip. Pinch your fingers together and imagine something smaller than a paperclip held between them. That much matter, ceasing to be matter, ended a city and tens of thousands of lives in a fraction of a second. That is the first key that humanity ever cut to a door that should never have been openable. And we cut it in the middle of a world war, and then we made tens of thousands of copies of the key. And here's the thing about that door. Once it's open, it doesn't close on its own. It just sits there, year after year, decade after decade, while human beings, fallible, emotional, tired, sometimes frightened, sometimes furious human beings, stand around holding the handle. Let me give you the closest we ever came, the one that should be taught in every school, and somehow isn't. October 1962. The Cuban Missile Crisis. We all know the broad strokes. Kennedy, Khrushchev, missiles in Cuba, the world on a knife's edge. But the moment that actually matters happened underwater, and almost nobody at the time even knew it occurred. There was a Soviet submarine, designation B-59, deep beneath the Atlantic, being hammered by depth charges from American ships that were trying to force it to surface. The crew didn't know the depth charges were warning shots. They'd lost radio contact. The air was running out. The temperature inside was climbing past anything survivable. Men were fainting. And that submarine was carrying a nuclear torpedo. The captain, half mad from the conditions, became convinced that the war had already started up above, and he gave the order to arm it and fire. Launching that torpedo required the agreement of 3 officers. 2 of them said yes, and 1 man, a flotilla commander named Vasily Arkhipov, who happened to be aboard that particular boat, said no. He argued. In a furnace, with the hull ringing like a struck bell and his captain screaming, this 1 man held the line and refused. And because of that single human being, in a steel tube no one was watching, you are alive to hear this sentence. That is how close the small jar came to slamming shut in 1962. And the door is still open. The arsenals are still there, modernized, dispersed. There is an organization, the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists, founded after the war by some of the very people who built the bomb, and out of their guilt and their foresight, they created a symbol. A clock. The Doomsday Clock. Its hands are set every year by a board of scientists to express how close they believe humanity is to self-destruction. Midnight is the end. For most of my life, that clock sat at a few minutes to midnight, and a few minutes feels survivable. It feels like there's time to find the bathroom and get back to the party. But they don't measure it in minutes anymore. As of the most recent setting, in January of 2026, the Doomsday Clock stands at 85 seconds to midnight. Not minutes, seconds. It is the closest to midnight that clock has ever been in its entire history, including the worst years of the Cold War. The people best positioned to know are telling us, in the only language they have, that the hour is later than it has ever been. And if ideas like this one are the kind of thing that lodge in your skull and keep you up, that low hum of
what if they're right? Then subscribing here is probably a sensible move, because where this goes next is stranger than where it's been. And I'd hate for you to wander off right before the floor gives way. Okay, onward. So now you've got a picture in your head. The picture is villains, mad captains, rogue states, a finger on a button. And I want to take that picture away from you, gently, because it's wrong. And it's the most dangerous wrong picture we have. Because here's the uncomfortable truth that runs all the way through Rees's book like a wire. The threat, almost always, is not evil. It's competence with a blind spot. It's smart, careful, well-meaning people who simply could not see the one thing that was going to kill them.
You might stop me here and say, come on, that's a comforting story we tell ourselves. Surely most disasters do have a villain somewhere. So let me give you 3, and you tell me where the villain is. Chernobyl. The night the reactor exploded, the engineers in that control room were not saboteurs. They were running a safety test. A test. They were trying to make the plant safer. They believed, with the full confidence of their training, that the reactor design was fundamentally sound, and there was a flaw buried in the physics of that reactor. A flaw in how it behaved at low power, that almost none of them fully understood. They pushed the machine into exactly the corner where the flaw lived. And the consequence is a zone around that plant that will not be safe for human beings to live in for thousands of years. Careful people, a safety test, a dead city. Challenger, 1986. The space shuttle that broke apart 73 seconds after launch, in front of school children watching on television because a teacher was aboard. The cause was a rubber seal, an O-ring that went stiff and brittle in the unusual cold of that Florida morning and failed to hold back the burning gas. And the thing that haunts me about Challenger is that an engineer named Roger Beaujolais had warned them. He'd argued the night before that it was too cold to launch. He was overruled by other competent people under pressure who looked at the same data and convinced themselves it would be fine. The physicist Richard Feynman, on the investigation afterward, did the most devastating thing imaginable. He just dropped a piece of that O-ring rubber into a glass of ice water in front of the cameras and showed everyone how it lost its springiness. No villain, just the gap between what people believed and what was true. And the third one is my favorite, because nobody saw it coming at all. For decades, we sprayed chemicals called CFCs out of every aerosol can and refrigerator on Earth. Harmless, we thought. Inert. They don't react with anything down here, which is exactly why we loved them. Nobody was thinking about what those molecules would do after they drifted, slowly, over years, up to the stratosphere, where ultraviolet light would crack them open and release chlorine that would eat the ozone layer, the thin shield that keeps the sun's radiation from sterilizing the surface of the planet. We tore a hole in the sky over Antarctica, and we didn't even know we were doing it, until a team of British scientists noticed the hole was already there. We got lucky on that one. We noticed, we acted, the hole is slowly healing. But notice the shape of it. The danger came from the thing we were most sure was safe. So it isn't them. The mad captain, the cackling villain. That's the story that lets us off the hook. Because it means the danger is some other kind of person. It isn't. It's us. It's the species-wide blind spot.
It's the safety test that destroys the reactor. It's the part of the future we are most confident about that turns out to be the part that kills us. And right about here is where I expected the book to wind down into a sensible list. Nuclear weapons, bad. Engineered pandemics, bad. Runaway technology, bad. A tidy, frightening catalog of ways to die. The kind of thing you nod along to and then forget by dinner. That is not what happened. Because at this point in following the thread, I noticed something I could not unnotice. And it's the thing this whole video has actually been about the entire time. You just didn't know it yet. Neither did I. Pay close attention to this next part. I'll go slowly. I had this list of horrors. The nuclear bomb, engineered viruses,
and the two big ones that the futurists obsess over, the ones Rees takes completely seriously, and that a Sun Microsystems founder named Bill Joy wrote a famous, terrified essay about in the year 2000, an essay called Why the Future Doesn't Need Us. Those two are runaway nanotechnology and runaway artificial intelligence. And I was looking at this list, these 5 or 6 totally different ways the world could end. Physics, biology, chemistry, computer science, all separate fields, all separate nightmares. And I was about to file them as separate when I saw it. They're not separate. They are all, every single one of them, the same nightmare, wearing different costumes. There is one shape underneath all of them, and once you see the shape, you cannot stop seeing it. The shape is this: a thing that copies itself, imperfectly, and cannot be stopped once it starts. Watch. The nuclear bomb. What actually is the explosion? It's a chain reaction.
One atom splits and throws out neutrons, and those neutrons split more atoms, which throw out more neutrons, which split more atoms. Each event triggers more of the same event. It's copying. Self-replicating destruction, doubling and doubling faster than thought until the city is gone. The bomb is a self-copying process that you cannot call back once the threshold is crossed. A pandemic. What is a virus? It is, almost by definition, the purest self-copying machine in nature. It is barely even alive. It has no other function. It is a tiny package of instructions whose only content is, copy me, copy me, copy me. And every copy is slightly imperfect, which is exactly why a new variant can outrun your immune system and your vaccines. Self-replication with errors, unstoppable past a certain point. Nanotechnology. This was the great fear of a man named Eric Drexler, who in 1986 wrote the book that basically founded the field as a popular idea, Engines of Creation. And I have to pause to correct something, because this gets garbled constantly, including in things I'd read before. Drexler wrote that book alone. The great AI pioneer Marvin Minsky contributed the foreword, the little introduction at the front. He was not a co-author. Anyway, Drexler imagined microscopic machines, assemblers that could build things atom by atom. And he immediately saw the nightmare buried in his own dream. And he gave it a name that stuck: grey-goo. Because if you build a microscopic machine that can build copies of itself out of the material around it, and why wouldn't you, that's the efficient way to get a lot of them, then a single flaw, a single failure to tell it when to stop, and it just keeps going. Eats the world to make more of itself. Self-replication with a missing off switch. And artificial intelligence, the real fear there, the one the serious people lose sleep over, isn't a robot with a gun. It's a system that can improve itself.
That can write a better version of itself, which writes a better version still. Each generation faster and smarter than the last. An intelligence explosion that copies and improves and copies and improves and leaves human comprehension behind in an afternoon. Self-replication in the realm of mind. Do you see it? Do you see the one engine under all of it? Every single apocalypse on the list is the same apocalypse. It is the apocalypse of the imperfect, self-copying machine that crosses a threshold and cannot be recalled. That is the monster. That is the only monster. We keep thinking we're afraid of many different things, and we're afraid of one thing in many masks. And I sat with that, feeling pretty clever, feeling like I'd found the unifying key. And then the floor opened up under me, because there was one more example of the imperfect self-copying machine that I had somehow, conveniently, left off the list. You. You are that thing.
You are a self-replicating machine that makes imperfect copies. That's not a metaphor, and it's not an insult. It's the most literal description of what a living organism is. Let me make it vivid, because this is the heart of the whole thing. Right now, in this instant, inside the cells of your body, there are machines. Real ones. They're called ribosomes, and there are millions upon millions of them in you. And a ribosome is, there's no softer way to say this, a molecular nano-assembler. It is exactly the kind of machine Drexler imagined and feared. It reads a strip of instructions and it builds, atom by atom, the proteins that are literally constructing you, maintaining you, keeping you from dissolving back into chemistry. You are not a being that contains nanomachines. You are a city of them. You were assembled, and you are right now being assembled by the very technology that the futurists are terrified we might one day invent. We won't invent it. It invented us.
And the copying is imperfect. That's the crucial part. When your cells divide, when life reproduces, the copies are never quite perfect. There are errors, mutations, little misspellings in the instructions. And here is the thing that should reframe your entire understanding of being alive. That imperfection is not a bug. It is the single most important feature in the history of the planet. The errors in self-copying are the raw material of evolution. No copying errors, no variation. No variation, no natural selection. No natural selection, no 4 billion years of life climbing from a single replicating molecule all the way up to a primate sitting here watching a video and worrying about the end of the world. The imperfect self-copying machine is the most dangerous thing in the universe. And it is also the only reason there is anyone here to be in danger.
The exact same property, replication with error, that could let grey-goo eat the earth or let a virus burn through 8 billion people, is the property that wrote you into existence. The monster on the list and the thing reading the list are the same machine. The monster is a mirror. When that landed on me, I just sat there for a while, because it means the danger isn't some alien intrusion into a safe world. The danger is the same process as the gift. They're not even close cousins. They're the identical mechanism, pointed in different directions. And it also means, and this is where I have to walk you out past the edge of Rees's book entirely into the territory he doesn't quite go, it means there's something deeply wrong with the jar argument we started with. The one that said you're probably near the end. Remember it? The 100-billionth human, the small jar, the thumb on the scale toward doom. There's a hole in it. And now, we have everything we need to find it.
The hole has a technical name. The philosophers call it the reference class problem. And it sounds dry, but stay with me, because it's the trap door under the whole thing. The jar argument only works if you know what's in the jar. Go back to the very beginning. 2 jars, 10 balls, or 1,000 balls. The whole logic depended on the balls being the same kind of thing, all members of one clean set, numbered 1 through whatever. The argument about your birth order does the exact same move. It assumes there's a clean, well-defined set called humans, that you're a random draw from it, and it asks where you fall in the sequence. But here is the question nobody asks until it's too late. What counts as a human? Because I just spent 10 minutes convincing you of something, and it has teeth here. I convinced you that you are a self-replicating machine that makes imperfect copies, and that the imperfection, the change between copies, is the entire engine of life. And what did Darwin tell us at the bottom of everything? He told us that no species is fixed. No species sends its own unchanged likeness forward into the deep future. Life is not a thing that persists. It's a thing that transforms. Your ancestors of 200,000 years ago were not quite us. Your ancestors of 2 million years ago, you would not call human if you met them. The whole story of life is a story of one kind of thing constantly becoming another kind of thing, because the copies are never perfect. So now look again at the jar. The argument wants to count humans and predict when the count runs out. But what if the count doesn't run out because we die? What if it runs out because we change? Think about where our own technology is already pointing. We are learning to edit our own genes, to reach into the instruction strip the ribosomes read, and rewrite it on purpose, for the first time in 4 billion years of life, leaving it to chance. We are merging with our machines a little more every year. The boundary between the biological self-copier and the technological self-copier is already blurring, and the futurists think it's going to dissolve entirely. And if we don't end this century, if we make it through the 85 seconds, past the open door, the long-term destiny that Rees himself sketches is a species that scatters off this single, fragile planet and out among the stars, where the radically different conditions of different worlds would, over enough time, do what different conditions always do to a self-copying machine. They'd change it into something else. Gene edited, machine merged, star scattered. Whatever our descendants are, 1 million years on, they will not be human. Not the way you and I are human. They'll be to us what we are to the small-brained creatures of the deep past. Kin, descendants, but a different kind of thing entirely. And that is the hole in the floor. That is the trap door. Maybe you are not rare, because the human story is about to end in death. Maybe you are rare because you are sitting in the last thin sliver of the story during which the main character is still human. Maybe the jar isn't small because we're about to go extinct. Maybe the jar of true, unedited, earthbound, recognizable humans really is small. But it's small because it's about to graduate into something the old categories can't hold. The count of humans runs out not at a graveyard, but at a threshold, a metamorphosis. Read that way, your improbable, early, ordinary birth isn't necessarily evidence that we're doomed. It might be evidence that you are one of the last true humans, one of the last members of the species in its original edition, before the rewrite. I genuinely don't know which reading is correct. I want to be honest about that. The math doesn't tell you whether the small jar means death or metamorphosis. It only tells you the jar is small. The thumb is on the scale. It just won't tell you which catastrophe, or whether the second one is a catastrophe at all. And there's something almost unbearable about standing at that fork, because both roads start from the same fact, the fact that you exist, here, now, holding a low number. And they lead to the two most different futures imaginable: the end of everything, or the threshold of something we can't even picture. And we are standing right on the seam between them, this century, with a coin in the air. I want to pull all the way back now, as far back as it's possible to go. In 1990, a space probe called Voyager 1 was leaving our solar system, headed out into the dark forever. It had already done its job, photographed the giant planets, sent home everything it was built to send. And the astronomer Carl Sagan had been pushing for years for one last command. He wanted the probe to turn its camera around, to look back across the whole emptiness it had crossed, and photograph the Earth one final time before it was too far away to matter. They did it. And in the photograph that came back, the Earth is not a majestic blue marble. From that distance, billions of miles, the Earth is less than a single pixel. A tiny, pale, almost invisible point of light, caught by chance in a stray band of scattered sunlight. You have to be told which speck it is, or you'd never find it. And Sagan looked at that pale blue dot, that mote of dust suspended in a sunbeam, and what he wanted us to understand was that everything is on it. Every person who ever lived. Every king and every beggar. Every war fought over which sliver of that pixel belonged to whom. Every lover, every newborn, every saint, and every monster. Every single one of those 117 billion human beings. All of it, the entire human story, took place on that one invisible speck. There is, as far as we know, nowhere else. No hint that help is coming from somewhere else to save us from ourselves. Now hold that image, the whole of us on a dot, next to everything we just walked through. The coin flip, the open door, the 85 seconds, the imperfect self-copying machine that is the monster and is also you, the fork between the ending and the metamorphosis. Here is the last thing, and I'll say it quietly because it doesn't need any help. The very same shape, the self-copying machine that makes imperfect copies and cannot quite be stopped, is the shape of every way we might destroy ourselves. And it is also the shape of the thing reading this, the shape that climbed 4 billion years out of the mud to look back at its own home planet and feel something. Whatever comes next on that dot may not be the end of the human story. It might be stranger than the end. It might just be the moment we hand the pen to something that grew out of us and won't remember being us. So look at the time again, the number you started with. And then, if you've got one to spare, look at your own hand. The fingers, the lines on the palm, the whole impossible machine of it, assembled atom by atom by the millions of tiny copiers inside you, right now, while you read this. That hand is the most dangerous thing in the universe, and it is the only reason any of this was ever here to be lost.